And our last speaker in this session on ads is Phil Cluff again from Mux. And Phil's going to be talking to us this time about the future of SSAI on OTT devices. Take it away, Phil.
Hey, I'm going to go relatively quickly. I'm not going to introduce myself again because I haven't changed in the last 2 hours. So I'm going to talk a bit about the future of SSAI on OTT devices. So quick bit of background. So we started World doing ads on browsers, client-side advertising. The experience was pretty crappy. Then the experience started getting better. Bandwidth improved. Browsers improved. We could do more video elements at once. And then ad blockers came along. And part of the reason for this was the creation then for things like SSAI. We created that as a response to things like ad blockers. But I'm not going to focus on browsers. I'm going to focus on OTT devices. The really weird thing about OTT devices is people have a different expectation when you're on a TV. It doesn't matter if you've got a box under the TV that's just a Linux box. People expect a broadcast-like experience just because it's on a TV. That means good audio normalization. That means no black frames during transitions, stuff like that. Very strange human beings, as it turns out. But there are very few ad blockers. There are some. There are pie holes you can go by that will shunt traffic off your smart TV down a hole. They do work, but the flip side is these devices have little RAM, little CPU, terrible browser engines, so this becomes a little challenging. How does SSAI work? There's a couple of ways. Approach one is manifest manipulation. We already talked about this with Google, right? On a manifest request, you generate a per-user manifest, get data back from an ad server, insert those ad pods. Google actually do some really cool stuff here because they share ads across caches, which is very cool. Insert them into the stream, put some markers in, kind of job done. Looks like this in HLS. Pretty simple. We have an HLS discontinuity marker. Just pretty simple stuff. We've already seen what Dash multi-period looks like. This is what it looks like in Dash. The other approach, there's still some solutions out there that do timestamp rewriting. This is a pretty much kind of the same approach. You still per user manifest, hit the ad server, but this also rewrites timestamps on content so that you don't need to manipulate the manifest to insert discontinuity flags or multi-periods. Generally, you will need to use kind of redirects on segments to make things like beaconing work. This is great for OTT devices and terrible for caching. So manifest manipulation sounds great. Let's just use that everywhere, right? So let's look at the devices people have in their living rooms, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I say there's about 4 classes of devices in the living room. Some people have different names for these. I know Netflix don't call them streaming boxes. These are the 4 categories I've gone to: streaming boxes, smart TVs, set-top boxes, and games consoles. Now, I'm going to show you some compatibility grids. Your mileage is going to vary. It's not your mileage may vary. This is completely going to vary for everyone. It depends on what budget you have available to you as to what sort of compatibility you're going to be able to get here. Generally, what I've done is focus on up-to-date devices, kind of 2018, 2019, ideally with a native video player playback, and running up-to-date firmware, which I'll talk about in a minute. So some good news. Streaming boxes are actually pretty good at doing this whole manifest manipulation thing, right? Chromecasts, Apple TVs, Rokus, Fire TVs, Android TV. I don't know what's happened to the logo down the bottom there. But anyway, these pretty much work. You have an option here, whether it's HLS with discontinuities or multi-period Dash, depending on exactly which bits of the ecosystem you're invested in. So this is actually pretty good. The bad ones, oh, this did not render nicely. Okay, so the bad ones are the so-called smart TVs, right? Samsung, yeah, modern Tizen has some level of support, and it has a vaguely passable MSE. Sony, again, a bit hit and miss. You're in a good situation if you're doing HLS with discontinuities, but once you get into the Dash world with DRM, it's getting a lot more messy. The good kind of situations here are the devices that use Android TV or Roku TV, because generally the compatibility from those platforms has been brought through onto the smart TV variants of those devices. I will send around a version of this slide that renders better later, sorry. There's then really the ugly devices, the set-top boxes of the world. This is a complete wash. Every device is different. Every set-top box is different. Every locale has a completely different set of set-top boxes by different manufacturers that you might be dealing with. So even support for Dash or DRM in general is a bit hairy. And then when you start throwing manifest manipulation on top of it, it gets even worse. Then there's what I call the forgotten devices of the living room. People tend to forget that they have games consoles that are real options to deliver streaming experiences to. So Xbox One is actually pretty good. It will do multiplayer Dash, it'll do HLS Discontinuities, it actually works pretty well. DRM works, Play Ready works well. PS4, I repeatedly get told that this is totally doable. I'm yet to see it practically meaningfully working without spending a huge amount of money on building your own players. So I say that's a no, in the nicest way. And Nintendo are refusing to return my emails still. Hulu in the room, right, actually? They have an app on that. So if you put that into numbers, streaming boxes, you got pretty good coverage. Smart TVs, if you're talking about up-to-date, recent devices, latest firmware, you've actually got pretty passable coverage as well. Set-top boxes, complete wash, and games consoles, maybe half of them, if you're lucky. So we've got some problems, but the picture I showed you is kind of incomplete. 42% of households in the UK have a smart TV of some breed. The uptake of streaming boxes, certainly in Europe, is poor. But we also have very little data on the age of smart TVs, and this is UK data. Every piece of data will vary for this. I actually went and tried to run my own statistics gathering exercises here. They were not successful, but we can make kind of approximations about the age of people's smart TVs. The adoption rate's about 6 to 7% a year, but it is slowing. Based on the adoption rate, we can say most smart TVs are more than 3 years old. And funnily enough, as Google said earlier, old smart TVs suck. The capabilities trail off really quickly. Out-of-date firmware is common, and manufacturers just don't care once it's in your living room, really. But these devices are still in the App Store. You might actually not even be able to upload an app onto the App Store for some of these. And this can be really hard to detect meaningfully. 3 years ago when I started doing SSAI stuff, yeah, there was pretty much no manifest manipulation support out there. I made a graph. This is pretty accurate, but I wouldn't rely on exact numbers. So kind of year across the bottom and support for manifest manipulation across going up the side. Modern smart TVs, that sort of thing, within a 1 to 2 year window, pretty good support. Then you get to this middling ground. Streaming boxes and games consoles have at least decent firmware support updates. Those devices are still maintained, which is great, so they still have support. Then you've got this long tail, which is just old streaming boxes with modern firmware. I can still buy a 4 or 5 year old Apple TV and get up-to-date firmware on it. So you probably want solutions. I think the first and most important thing anyone should do is really understand what problem you have. It can be really hard to know what devices people have in their living rooms because they tend to have several. I've got 5 devices in my living room that has Netflix. In one of those is a smart TV. The thing I think people should remember is, and Netflix are in the room, but you're not Netflix, and you probably shouldn't try to be Netflix yet. This might not be the best way to spend your time and money targeting all of these platforms. So you can totally fall back to not ad filling on old devices. This is totally fine. Your business team will hate this, to be clear, but the cost of supporting 0.002% of users on an old LG Smart TV way outweighs any money you're ever going to make coming in from ads on those devices. These devices might not even support Dash, let alone Dash plus DRM plus ad insertion. And again, actually this is mentioned by Google, but DRM can totally be a limiting factor on the compatibility you've got. So sometimes if you check your studio contracts, you might not need DRM for SD content. So sometimes it might actually be possible to make the trade-off of, well, I can have ads, but not DRM, so I have to lock the resolution down to SD. Again, may or may not be popular with the business team, but it's worth taking a look into those as opportunities. My favorite solution to this problem is sending people Chromecasts. I've worked on 2 projects that did this, and I know of at least 4 or 5 more where super old smart TVs were just, in fact, in one case, literally could not upload a new app to the App Store, so they decided to send people Chromecasts. It's surprising how cheap these things are at bulk, because there's relatively few drivers to upgrade your smart TV once you've got one. Samsung will tell you over and over that 8K is totally a thing in the living room. I completely disagree, unfortunately. Worst case, yeah, server-side stitching will actually get you onto a lot of these devices. Particularly, a great example of where this has worked well is in Australia on old HbbTV devices, the first generation of HbbTV. That really had no support for multi-period. In fact, I think the spec actually explicitly said no multi-period. So there's going to be big compromises with this. Cache performance, you might lose 30 to 40%. Origin egress obviously increases dramatically. Edge compute requirements or origin compute, depending on where you're doing the stitching, is going to increase. It's not going to be frame accurate. It's not going to be broadcast-like. So kind of going back to our original idea of wanting to do it on OTT living room devices, you start to sacrifice on that. I said I'd talk about the future. Probably the biggest thing, the most exciting thing for me, based in Europe, is that there is a standard coming for HbbTV advertising. This does some really cool stuff, requirements around midstream switching, how many streams can be in a buffer at once, all those sorts of things. The idea is to get to a broadcast-like experience, and this even works with live, so doing in-stream switching, live, in HbbTV, ad replacement. This totally works. It's probably a few years away from major adoption. It's obviously missed the boat for HbbTV 2, but this should be a really impressive next step for getting ad insertion working reliably on OTT devices. Unfortunately, it doesn't really help the US market. So in the US, I think what we need to do is encourage platform builders to build on top of Android TV, Roku TV, those sorts of things, because those are going to be the platforms where it gets to be a bit more universal. I think there's going to be some increasing problems with SSAI. In fact, this was one of the questions earlier. Everyone kind of knows what beacons are, but beacons are what record ad viewership. You don't record the beacons, you don't get paid. So that pretty much sucks. A lot of the server-side ad insertion platforms used to do server-side beaconing, but this is now becoming unacceptable because it's very hard to verify server-side beacons meaningfully. So what you've got now is kind of this hybrid SSAI for doing the video stitching, then client-side ads, but those client-side beacons do totally get blocked by the ad blockers, and then you've actually ended up rendering an ad, and then not getting paid for rendering that ad, and everyone loses then, right? Because the user's seen an ad and you didn't get any money for it. So that sucks. One of the other future things coming up, programmatic, obviously. Programmatic is a big deal. It's growing massively. I think this is going to cause pretty big problems with ad catalog size. The ad catalog bloat is going to get huge. This is going to slow down startup times as you do ad requests. It's going to make ad stitching less effective massively. This is going to be a big challenge, so I think manifest manipulation is going to be hugely beneficial to get us through this growth in programmatic as well. So it was only a 10-minute. I was spot on time, but in summary, smart TVs and set-top boxes still suck at manifest-based manipulation, but are getting better in recent years. It's probably better to target an up-to-date living room device rather than kind of waiting for that market to grow in. And you're not Netflix, so unless you are Netflix. You should be creative, be good at what you're good at, be that content, rather than just trying desperately to be on every single device. Some ideas: mobile, QE, streaming boxes, and only then kind of really focusing on a smart TV environment. That's it. I'm a little over time, but I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, well, I think we'll defer questions for the break, but please join me in thanking Phil. Again, thank you, Phil.